The dusty auction ring in Copper Creek, Texas, buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that preceded either great fortune or spectacular disaster. 17-year-old Jasper Jazz McKenna pressed his worn cowboy hat lower over his eyes, trying to blend into the weathered wooden bleachers as billionaire cattle baron Sterling Wolfheart surveyed the crowd like a predator selecting prey. Jazz clutched the crumpled $50 bill in his jacket pocket, money he'd earned loading hay bales in the scorching summer heat. He'd come to the monthly livestock auction with one desperate hope: to buy a young heifer he could raise and breed, something to help his grandmother pay the crushing medical debt that threatened to take their small ranch. "Ladies and gentlemen," boomed auctioneer Wade Hutchinson, his voice echoing through the tin-roofed building, "prepare yourselves for something truly special. Lot 23, Midnight Fury, the most unpredictable, most dangerous bull in the entire Southwest. This beast has hospitalized 12 cowboys and destroyed more equipment than a Category 5 tornado." Jazz's breath caught as they led the massive bull into the ring. Midnight Fury stood nearly 7 feet at the shoulder, his coal-black hide rippling with muscle that looked like it had been carved from obsidian. His horns swept forward like twin crescents of polished bone, and his eyes, deep amber pools that seemed to glow with their own inner fire, held an intelligence that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. "Opening bid starts at $8,000, Hutchinson announced. Several ranchers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none raised their hands. Sterling Wolfheart rose from his front row seat with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to commanding attention. At 58, he owned more land than some small countries and had the reputation of someone who collected victories the way other men collected stamps. His silver beard was perfectly trimmed, and his ice-blue eyes missed nothing. "8,000, Wolfheart said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of absolute wealth. The bidding died instantly. No one in Copper Creek was foolish enough to compete with Sterling Wolfheart when he wanted something. The auctioneer's gavel fell with the finality of a judge's sentence. "Sold to Mr. Wolfheart for $8,000. Jazz watched in fascination as ranch hands began the dangerous process of moving Midnight Fury toward the loading chutes. The bull moved with surprising grace, but his head never stopped turning, those amber eyes cataloging every face, every movement, as if he were memorizing details for some future reckoning. "You're Ezekiel McKenna's grandson, aren't you?" Jazz spun around to find Sterling Wolfheart standing directly behind him, flanked by 2 of his ranch foremen. The billionaire had approached with the silent precision of a hunting cat. "Yes, sir. Jasper McKenna." Jazz stood straighter, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Wolfheart's smile was sharp as a blade. "I knew your grandfather when he was still competing in the rodeo circuit. Fine cowboy, before age and arthritis slowed him down." He paused, letting the words settle. "I understand your family is facing some financial challenges." Heat flooded Jazz's face. Everyone in 3 counties knew about Grandpa Zeke's hospital bills and the second mortgage that was slowly strangling their ranch. "We're handling our affairs just fine, sir." "Of course you are." Wolfheart's tone was silk wrapped around steel. "But I couldn't help noticing that $50 you've been guarding so carefully. Planning to make a purchase today?" Jazz's hand instinctively moved to protect his money. "Maybe," still looking around. Admirable caution. Wolfheart gestured toward the loading area where Midnight Fury was being secured in a reinforced trailer. "Tell me, young man, how would you like to own that bull?" The crowd around them fell silent, sensing the approach of either entertainment or tragedy. Jazz felt his stomach drop as he realized this was some kind of elaborate setup. "I don't understand what you mean, sir." "It's quite simple." Wolfheart's voice carried across the auction barn, ensuring maximum audience. "I just purchased that magnificent animal for $8,000, but I'm feeling charitable today. I'll sell him to you for exactly what you have in your pocket, $50. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone whistled low and called out, "That boy's gonna be hamburger in 5 minutes." Another voice shouted, "Wolfheart's finally gone soft in the head." Jazz felt every eye in the building boring into him. He could walk away, keep his dignity and his $50, and remain just another struggling ranch kid. Or he could accept this humiliating offer and become the laughingstock of Copper Creek County. But then he thought about Grandpa Zeke, sitting in his rocking chair each evening, staring at the stack of medical bills that grew thicker every week. About their small herd of cattle that barely produced enough income to keep the lights on. About the proud McKenna legacy that was slowly crumbling under the weight of circumstances beyond their control. "What's the catch?" Jazz asked quietly. Wolfheart's grin widened. "No catch at all. You'll own him outright, along with full responsibility for feeding him, housing him, and dealing with whatever destruction he causes." His voice dropped to a mock whisper that everyone could hear. "Of course, when he inevitably kills you or bankrupts your family, I want you to remember that you chose this path." Jazz looked across the barn to where Midnight Fury was being loaded into the trailer. The bull had stopped moving and was staring directly at him through the metal slats. Those amber eyes seemed to be asking a question, issuing a challenge, or perhaps making a promise that Jazz couldn't quite understand. "I'll take him," Jazz said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. The laughter died instantly. Wolfheart's expression shifted for just a moment, surprise flickering across his features before his predatory smile returned. "Excellent decision. My men will deliver him to your property within the hour." Wolfheart extended his hand for the money. "And son," he leaned closer, his breath smelling of expensive bourbon, "when that bull destroys everything your family has worked for, remember that I offered you wisdom, and you chose folly instead." As Jazz handed over his $50, his fingers trembling slightly with adrenaline, he caught one final glimpse of Midnight Fury. The bull had maneuvered himself so he could maintain eye contact with Jazz even from inside the trailer. And in those amber depths, Jazz saw something that made his heart race with both terror and strange anticipation. This wasn't just any bull. This was a creature with secrets, with purpose, with an intelligence that went far beyond anything Jazz had ever encountered. And somehow, he knew that the next few days would either destroy his family completely or change their lives in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The trailer doors slammed shut with the finality of a vault, but Jazz could still feel those amber eyes watching him through the steel. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. The earth trembled beneath the weight of Wolfheart's custom livestock trailer as it rumbled down the gravel road toward the McKenna ranch. Jazz stood beside their weathered wooden corral, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across their modest property, and the air shimmered with heat waves that made everything look like a mirage. The screen door of their small farmhouse creaked open, and Grandpa Zeke shuffled onto the front porch, leaning heavily on his carved wooden cane. At 73, Ezekiel McKenna still carried himself with the dignity of a man who'd once been the finest bronc rider in 3 states, but arthritis had gnarled his hands and slowed his step. "Jasper McKenna!" Zeke called out, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent shouting over cattle and wind. "Please tell me you didn't do what I think you just did." Before Jazz could answer, the massive trailer shuddered to a halt in their driveway with a hiss of air brakes that echoed across the valley. Sterling Wolfheart emerged from the passenger seat, like a king stepping down from his throne, adjusting his hand-tailored jacket despite the sweltering heat. "Special delivery for young Master McKenna," Wolfheart announced with theatrical grandeur. His driver, a weathered cowboy named Dutch, began the careful process of preparing to unload their cargo. One prize bull, as promised. The first indication of what was coming wasn't visual, it was the sound. A low, rumbling breath that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself, followed by the deliberate stamp of a hoof against the trailer floor. Then came a scent that made Jazz's nostrils flare. Wild sage and something else, something ancient and untamed that spoke of vast prairies and storms building on distant horizons. When the trailer doors swung open, Midnight Fury didn't emerge. He made an entrance. The bull stepped down the ramp with the measured dignity of royalty, each movement calculated and precise. In the golden light of the setting sun, he looked even more magnificent than he had in the auction barn. His midnight coat seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and when he raised his massive head to survey his new domain, those amber eyes caught the last rays of sunlight like molten gold. "Sweet mother of pearl," Zeke whispered, unconsciously gripping his cane tighter. But Jazz found himself stepping forward instead of back. There was something about Midnight Fury's bearing that commanded respect rather than fear. This wasn't the chaotic aggression of a mad animal. This was controlled power, intelligence wrapped in 2,000 pounds of muscle and bone. "Easy there, boy," Dutch warned, pulling thick work gloves over his scarred hands. "This one's put more cowboys in the hospital than bad whiskey and broken hearts combined." As if offended by the comparison, Midnight Fury turned his massive head toward Dutch and fixed him with a stare that could have frozen flame. The veteran cowboy actually stumbled backward, his face going pale beneath his weathered tan. "Magnificent creature, isn't he?" Wolfheart said, his voice dripping with false admiration. 2,000 pounds of pure destruction wrapped in black velvet. "I do hope your insurance premiums are current, Mr. McKenna." Zeke's jaw tightened. "We don't need your charity or your threats, Wolfheart." "Charity?" The billionaire's laugh was like ice cracking in winter. "This is business, pure and simple. Your grandson made a deal, and I always honor my contracts." He produced an official-looking document from his jacket. "Ownership papers, all legal and properly notarized. Midnight Fury now belongs to the McKenna family, along with all associated risks and liabilities." Jazz barely heard the exchange. He was mesmerized by Midnight Fury, who had begun what could only be described as an inspection of his new home. The bull's amber eyes swept across the modest ranch house, the aging barn, the patches of sun-scorched earth where grass struggled to survive. But it wasn't the vacant stare of a dumb animal. It was the analytical gaze of something evaluating territory, calculating advantages, measuring possibilities. Then those eyes found Jazz. Time seemed to suspend itself like dust in a shaft of sunlight. Midnight Fury's massive head tilted slightly, and for a long moment that felt like an eternity, boy and bull studied each other across 30 feet of Texas dirt. Jazz felt as though he were being examined by an intelligence far older and deeper than his 17 years could comprehend. "Fury," Jazz said softly, the nickname emerging without conscious thought. The bull's ears swiveled forward with laser precision. The response was subtle but unmistakable, acknowledgement from a creature that understood far more than he should. "Well, this has been thoroughly entertaining," Wolfheart said, breaking the spell. "But I have a conference call with investors in Houston. Dutch, secure the animal and let's depart." But as Dutch approached with a heavy lead rope, Midnight Fury did something that made everyone freeze in astonishment. Instead of charging or rearing or displaying any of the legendary violence that had made him notorious, he simply walked, with calm deliberation, toward the corral gate. Dutch stopped mid-stride, rope hanging slack in his hands. "Well, I'll be hornswoggled." Midnight Fury paused at the gate and turned back to look at Jazz with what could only be described as expectation. The message was crystal clear. He was ready to enter his new home, but it would be on his own terms, with dignity intact. "Open the gate," Jazz said quietly. "Son, that bull could—" Zeke began. "Open the gate," Jazz repeated, his voice carrying a certainty that surprised even himself. With hands that trembled like autumn leaves, Jazz unlatched the corral gate and swung it wide. Midnight Fury walked through as calmly as a gentleman entering a drawing room, then positioned himself in the center of the enclosure and turned to face his audience. His gaze swept over Dutch and the trailer, dismissing them as irrelevant. It lingered on Wolfheart for a moment, a look of such profound contempt that the billionaire actually took a step backward. Then those amber eyes found Jazz again, and something passed between them that neither could have explained, but both understood completely. "Impossible," Wolfheart murmured, but his voice carried a note of unease that hadn't been there before. As the trailer disappeared down the dirt road, leaving behind only the scent of diesel fumes and the memory of cruel laughter, Jazz remained at the corral fence. Midnight Fury had begun to graze, but even while eating, his attention remained partially focused on his new human companion. "Jazz," Zeke said quietly, joining his grandson at the fence. "I've been around cattle my entire life, and I've never seen anything like that. That bull, he's not what he appears to be." Jazz nodded slowly, understanding exactly what his grandfather meant. "What do you think he really is?" Zeke studied Midnight Fury with eyes that had seen everything the rodeo circuit could offer. "I think, grandson, that Sterling Wolfheart just made the biggest mistake of his life, and I think our troubles are either about to get a whole lot worse or a whole lot better? As the first stars appeared in the darkening Texas sky, Jazz found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, $50 was about to prove itself the best investment the McKenna family had ever made. If this incredible story of mystery, intelligence, and unexpected partnerships has captured your imagination, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps us continue bringing you amazing tales of courage, loyalty, and the extraordinary bonds that can form between humans and animals. Trust me, what happens next with Jazz and Midnight Fury will absolutely blow your mind. 5 days had passed since Midnight Fury's arrival at the McKenna Ranch, and the entire county was buzzing with rumors about the death bull that had supposedly turned docile. But what the gossips didn't know was that something far more extraordinary was happening behind the weathered fence posts and rusty gates of the struggling ranch. Jazz crouched beside the corral at sunrise, watching Fury move through what could only be described as a morning routine. The massive bull would methodically inspect every inch of the fence line, test the strength of each post with a gentle nudge of his massive head, then position himself at the exact center of the enclosure where he could observe the entire property. "Morning, Fury," Jazz said softly, as had become their daily ritual. The bull's amber eyes immediately locked onto his, and what happened next still took Jazz's breath away. Midnight Fury approached the fence and deliberately lowered his enormous head until his velvet muzzle was inches from Jazz's outstretched palm. The trust implicit in that gesture was staggering. 2,000 pounds of raw power choosing vulnerability over aggression. "Easy, big guy," Jazz whispered, gently stroking the bull's forehead. "What secrets are you hiding?" From the house came the familiar tap-tap-tap of Grandpa Zeke's cane on the wooden porch. "Jazz, you need to see this," Zeke called out, his voice tight with concern. Jazz reluctantly pulled away from Fury and joined his grandfather, who was staring down the ranch road with his old rodeo champion's eyes. A cloud of dust was approaching fast, too fast for a social visit. A sleek black SUV emerged from the dust cloud, its government plates glinting in the morning sun. The vehicle came to a precise stop in their yard, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of a federal courthouse. She was tall, sharp-featured, wearing an expensive business suit that somehow remained unwrinkled despite the Texas heat. "Dr. Victoria Steele," she announced, approaching them with the confident stride of someone accustomed to authority. "I'm with the Department of Agricultural Security. I believe you have something that belongs to the United States government." Zeke's grip tightened on his cane. "Ma'am, everything on this property belongs to the McKenna family, has for 3 generations. Dr. Steele's smile was professional but cold. "I'm referring to the bull you purchased 5 days ago. The animal you call Midnight Fury is actually designated as Asset November 77, and he represents 15 years of classified research and development." Jazz felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "What kind of research?" "The kind that could revolutionize everything we know about animal intelligence and military applications," Dr. Steele replied, pulling a tablet from her briefcase. "That bull has been genetically enhanced and behaviorally conditioned to possess cognitive abilities that border on the supernatural." Behind them, Midnight Fury had moved to the fence closest to their conversation. His massive head was raised, ears pricked forward with laser focus on Dr. Steele. And in those amber eyes, Jazz could swear he saw something that looked distinctly like recognition and hatred. "Enhanced how?" Zeke asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Dr. Steele hesitated, as if deciding how much classified information to reveal. "Midnight Fury can process complex problem-solving scenarios, respond to over 100 verbal and visual commands, and..." She paused, glancing at the bull who was watching her with unnerving intensity. "He possesses an almost supernatural ability to locate hidden objects and navigate terrain using senses we don't fully understand." Jazz's mind raced back to the past 5 days. The way Fury had systematically explored every inch of their property. The strange behavior he'd exhibited yesterday when he'd spent an hour pawing at one specific spot near the old barn. The uncanny way the bull seemed to anticipate Jazz's movements and intentions. "If he's so valuable, why did Sterling Wolfheart sell him to me for $50? Jazz demanded. Dr. Steele's professional mask slipped slightly. "Because Sterling Wolfheart stole him from our research facility 6 months ago." The man you know as a cattle baron is actually a black market dealer in rare genetics and classified military assets. He's been trying to reverse engineer Fury's enhancements, but the bull... She looked directly at Midnight Fury, who was now standing perfectly still, every muscle coiled like a spring. The bull has been systematically sabotaging every attempt to exploit his abilities. Sabotaging how? Zeke's question came out as barely more than a whisper. Destroyed laboratory equipment worth millions, escaped from supposedly secure facilities 7 times, injured researchers who tried to use harsh conditioning methods. Dr. Steele's voice carried a note of respect that seemed almost involuntary. He's been waging a one-bull war against anyone who tries to treat him as just an asset instead of a sentient being. Jazz looked at Fury, who had positioned himself so he could maintain eye contact while keeping Dr. Steele in his peripheral vision. Why did Wolfheart give him to us? Because your family owns mineral rights to land that contains the largest undiscovered rare earth deposit in North America, Dr. Steele said grimly. Wolfheart couldn't break Fury's spirit, couldn't make him perform, couldn't sell him without exposing his own criminal activities. So he found a way to create a disaster that would force your family off the land while getting rid of an asset that had become a liability. The implications hit Jazz like a physical blow. Wolfheart hadn't been showing cruel generosity. He'd been setting up a catastrophe that would accomplish multiple goals: destroy the McKenna family, clear the way for his mineral extraction operation, and eliminate a creature that had made him look like a fool. But he'd made one crucial miscalculation. Fury, Jazz said quietly, turning to face the bull. Show Dr. Steele what you can really do. What happened next would be burned into Jazz's memory forever. Midnight Fury walked to the center of the corral and began what could only be described as a demonstration of impossible intelligence. The bull approached a section of fence and, using his horns with surgical precision, manipulated the wooden slats to create a complex geometric pattern. Then he moved to a water trough and somehow managed to create ripples on the surface that formed perfect concentric circles. But the most astounding display came when Fury approached the spot near the barn where he'd been pawing yesterday. Using his hooves with the delicacy of a master craftsman, he began to excavate. Within minutes, he'd uncovered something that made Dr. Steele gasp in amazement. A metal briefcase, buried and hidden for decades. Impossible, Dr. Steele breathed. How did he know that was there? Midnight Fury looked directly at Jazz, his message crystal clear. He'd been trying to show them this discovery for days, waiting for them to understand that he was offering them something far more valuable than his simple presence. Jazz knelt beside the briefcase and carefully opened it. Inside, wrapped in waterproof material, were dozens of geological survey documents and what appeared to be land deeds dating back to the 1940s. These are the original mineral rights surveys, Dr. Steele said, her voice filled with awe. Documentation that proves your family's ownership of the rare earth deposits goes back generations. With these documents, Wolfheart's attempts to claim the land through foreclosure would be legally meaningless. Jazz looked up at Midnight Fury, understanding flooding through him like sunrise after the darkest night. You weren't just escaping from Wolfheart. You were trying to get home. You knew these documents were here. The bull's response was to walk directly to Jazz and gently rest his massive head against the young man's shoulder. It was a gesture of such profound trust and affection that Dr. Steele actually stepped backward in amazement. In 15 years of working with enhanced animals, she said quietly, I've never seen anything like this. He's not just intelligent, he's choosing his allegiance. He's choosing his family. As the morning sun climbed higher over the Texas plains, Jazz felt the pieces of an impossible puzzle finally clicking into place. Midnight Fury wasn't just a genetically enhanced research animal. He was a guardian, a protector, a creature of such remarkable intelligence that he'd orchestrated his own rescue while simultaneously saving the family that had shown him kindness instead of exploitation. Dr. Steele, Jazz said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I think we need to have a much longer conversation about exactly what Sterling Wolfheart has been doing and what Fury's really capable of, because something tells me this is just the beginning. The distant rumble of engines announced new arrivals, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Through the heat shimmer on the horizon, Jazz could see a convoy of black SUVs racing toward their ranch. Midnight Fury's entire demeanor changed instantly. His head snapped up, ears forward, muscles bunching beneath his midnight coat. Those amber eyes blazed with an intensity that was both magnificent and terrifying. Dr. Steele followed his gaze and went pale. Wolfheart. He must have been monitoring my movements. She looked at Jazz with something approaching panic. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, stay close to the bull. He may be the only thing standing between your family and disaster. The convoy of black SUVs roared into the McKenna ranch yard like an invasion force, kicking up clouds of dust that darkened the morning sky. Jazz counted at least 8 vehicles disgorging men in tactical gear, their movements coordinated with military precision. But at the center of it all, stepping from a custom-armored limousine, was Sterling Wolfheart. No longer the polished businessman from the auction, but a man whose mask had finally slipped to reveal something far more dangerous. Dr. Steele? Wolfheart called out, his voice carrying across the yard with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. You're trespassing on private property, and you have something that belongs to me. Midnight Fury moved to the front of the corral, positioning himself between his chosen family and the approaching threat. Every muscle in his massive frame was coiled like a spring, and his amber eyes blazed with an intensity that made even the armed men hesitate. Asset November 7-7 belongs to the United States government, Dr. Steele replied, her voice steady despite the obvious disadvantage in numbers. And you, Mr. Wolfheart, are under federal arrest for theft of classified military assets. Wolfheart's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. Federal arrest? With what authority? You're one woman with a briefcase, standing on land I now own. He pulled out his phone and showed them a document. Foreclosure papers, filed this morning. The McKenna ranch belongs to Wolfheart Industries, effective immediately. Zeke's face went gray, but Jazz stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Those foreclosure papers are worthless. Excuse me? Wolfheart's confidence faltered slightly. Jazz held up the documents that Midnight Fury had helped them discover. Original mineral rights surveys from 1947. Our family's ownership of this land and everything under it goes back 3 generations. Your attempts to steal our property through manufactured debt are legally meaningless. For the first time since his arrival, genuine fury flashed across Wolfheart's features. You have no idea what you're dealing with, boy. That bull is worth more than $50 million in research and development. I've invested 2 years of my life tracking him down. Then you should have been more careful about who you crossed, a new voice said from behind them. Everyone turned to see a convoy of military vehicles approaching from the opposite direction. Leading them was a man in full-dress uniform, his bearing unmistakably that of someone who'd spent decades in command positions. General Marcus Hamilton, U.S. Army Intelligence, the newcomer announced as he strode toward them with purpose. Mr. Wolfheart, you're under arrest for theft of classified government property, illegal genetic experimentation, and conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism. Wolfheart's men began reaching for their weapons, but what happened next defied every expectation and redefined everyone's understanding of what was possible. Midnight Fury vaulted over the corral fence. The massive bull moved with the fluid grace of a dancer and the lethal precision of a weapon. He didn't attack randomly or charge blindly. Every movement was calculated, every action surgical in its accuracy. Within seconds, he had positioned himself between the armed men and the McKenna family, his massive frame a living shield. But Fury wasn't content to simply defend. Using tactics that seemed to come from some impossible combination of military training and animal instinct, the bull began to systematically disarm Wolfheart's mercenaries. A perfectly timed shoulder check sent one man's rifle spinning through the air. A precise movement of his horns caught another's weapon and tossed it beyond reach. His hooves, moving with the accuracy of a master craftsman, managed to trip 3 men simultaneously without causing serious injury. Impossible, Wolfheart breathed, watching his supposedly elite team being systematically dismantled by a single animal. He's just a bull. Enhanced intelligence doesn't mean combat capability. General Hamilton's smile was grim. Midnight Fury isn't just enhanced Wolfheart. He's the prototype for a new generation of military assets, genetically modified for intelligence, strength, and tactical awareness, trained by the best special forces instructors in the world. You didn't steal a research animal, you stole a living weapon. As if to prove the general's point, Fury executed a maneuver that belonged in a battlefield manual rather than a barnyard. Using his massive bulk as leverage, he managed to herd the remaining armed men into a tight group, then positioned himself so they couldn't fire without risking hitting each other. Jazz watched in amazement as his $50 investment revealed himself to be something beyond imagination. A creature that combined the raw power of nature with the strategic thinking of a military genius. "Why did you give him to us?" Jazz called out to Wolfheart. "If he's so valuable, why didn't you just keep him locked up?" Wolfheart's face twisted with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "Because he wouldn't perform for me. 2 years of trying every technique known to science, and he refused to cooperate. He destroyed my facilities, injured my researchers, and cost me millions in damages. I thought if I could create a disaster that would force your family off this land, you could claim the mineral rights and eliminate an asset that had become a liability," Dr. Steele finished. "But you underestimated his loyalty and intelligence." As the dust settled and General Hamilton's men secured Wolfheart's disabled mercenaries, Midnight Fury approached Jazz with the same gentle dignity he'd shown from their first meeting. The massive bull lowered his head, and Jazz reached out to stroke the velvet-soft muzzle of the most dangerous and valuable animal in North America. "Easy, Fury," Jazz whispered. "You're home now." Dr. Steele approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity overcoming her professional reserve. "The bond you formed with him is unprecedented. In all our research, we never achieved this level of trust and cooperation." General Hamilton nodded in agreement. "Which brings us to an interesting proposition, young man." Jazz looked up from Fury, sensing that another life-changing moment was approaching. "What kind of proposition?" "The military would like to offer you and your family a contract," Hamilton explained. "Midnight Fury has chosen you as his partner. Rather than separate you, we'd like to establish a joint research facility here on your ranch. You'd maintain ownership of Fury while helping us understand the bond you've created. The compensation would be substantial." Jazz glanced at Grandpa Zeke, who was grinning despite everything they'd been through. The old rodeo champion nodded slowly. "How substantial?" Jazz asked. Dr. Steele consulted her tablet. "Approximately $2 million annually, plus full medical coverage for your family, educational funding, and protection from any future attempts to steal your land or assets." As Sterling Wolfheart was led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him, Jazz looked at Midnight Fury and marveled at the impossible chain of events that had brought them together. "You know what the amazing part is, Fury?" Jazz said softly, scratching behind the bull's ears. "Wolfheart thought he was destroying us with his cruel joke. Instead, he gave us everything we needed to save ourselves and build something incredible." 6 months later, the McKenna Research Ranch had become one of the most advanced animal intelligence facilities in the world. Midnight Fury had become a legend, featured in National Geographic, and studied by scientists from every continent. But to Jazz, he remained what he'd always been: a partner, a friend, and proof that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come disguised as the cruelest punishments. As the Texas sun set over their transformed property, Jazz stood in the pasture beside his unlikely partner, watching scientists document behaviors that were rewriting textbooks on animal cognition. Fury grazed peacefully beside him, no longer Asset November 77, but a creature whose intelligence and loyalty had changed multiple lives. "You know what the best part is?" Jazz said, running his hand along Fury's powerful neck. "We proved that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold or stolen. They can only be earned through trust, respect, and love." Midnight Fury raised his massive head and looked at Jazz with those intelligent amber eyes, and in that moment, both understood a fundamental truth. Sometimes a $50 investment in faith and kindness can yield dividends that transform not just your circumstances, but your understanding of what's truly possible in this world. And sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones that choose you right back. If this incredible journey of loyalty, intelligence, and the triumph of the underdog has moved you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the most impossible dreams can come true when we open our hearts to unexpected partnerships. Remember, the greatest victories often come to those brave enough to see potential where others see only problems. Until next time, keep believing in the extraordinary. A billionaire gave a rodeo bull to a poor boy just to mock him. But something changed everything.